Right? So the only thing that you missed was I took some of this pure blue-green that I had used. I put out on my palette here. I love these little watercolors like this. They come in so handy. So they have these nice metal palettes. Anyway, I grabbed some of this bluish green that I had, and I went through, and you can see I just needed a little bit more definition. So I added some blue-green here. I did it along this stem, and I added a little bit along this stem. Then I think what I'm going to do next, I'm going to kind of go in with a darker color. Along the way, I had been using that same finger rubbing method. I'm not sure. I don't usually do that. I'm not sure why I'm doing that today, but I don't know. It feels like it needs it today. Again, I've got my paper towel right here, so I'm just cleaning off my brush. I want to take one of these dark red colors, like purpley red colors. There's a very fine line on the jade plant that just, if you look at the tip of the jade plant, there's a very, very fine line of red. This could almost be done better with a colored pencil, since my watercolor brush tip is not a super great brush tip, but I could just take one of these dark colors. I'm just going to check it and see. It's very purpley, maybe a slightly bit more red. And I'm just going to grab a couple of these colors on my brush here, and I'm just going to take, it's very subtle. It's just a tiniest little red line, right? Reddish purple line that kind of runs like right along the top of the plant. I can see it on almost every leaf, even like if that's in the light, but down here it's darker. If you're thinking about underneath of that one, can't really see it that much, but I'm going to put a little bit down there just to be consistent. Trying to remember, I have a lot of leaves on my plant that I didn't actually paint, so I'm just kind of trying to figure out where I want. This is when I'm slowing down and being a little bit more careful. I had been speed painting up until this point. So I'm just adding. This is going to kind of help define this leaf because it goes around like that. And then this is the darker part down here. So I can even use that color to kind of shade it in. I don't like that. I'm going to put a little bit more green on top of that. There, I like that better. Okay, then I'm going to put on this guy, I'm going to put just a little, oh, now I've got dark green on my brush. Good thing I was doing that somewhere where I don't mind having dark green. I'm going to have to refill my brush on, my brush tip got kind of messed up there. So let's see, I was grabbing from this guy, a little bit of this guy. I'm pretty sure I had all of these colors at some point. Let's see, I'm going to try to put a little right here. I think that looks okay, just that really subtle. Again, you can still see my pencil markings, and I think that's okay. I like how that looks. I'm going to build on this color that I'm using on the leaves like that. I'm going to go back now, and I'm going to look at the color that I might want for the dirt. So I need a brownish color, so I'm going to grab a couple colors and try mixing them here. So I've got a really bright red up here. Maybe do a little bit of a green in there. I kind of want it to be more reddish, except my pot, I might change the color of my pot in the picture. My pot is, excuse me, kind of like an earthenware color. I might change it a little bit. All right, oh, that's not so bad actually. Make this dark color. It actually is a black, and use that along here. With the watercolor brush like this, if you are doing, if you're doing like these edges down here where you don't want it to get too wet, you actually can do a lot of sort of dry brushing with this brush, as long as it's not as long as the brush that you have is not a leaky brush. I've gotten, that sounds ridiculous, but I've gotten these watercolor brushes before, and I've done a lot of dry, now see that's getting kind of wet, a lot of dry painting where it's more like this, it's more like that. There's not a lot of water compared to the amount of pigment that I'm using. And that's how I was getting really used to doing my watercolors. It's almost more like using a marker that way, and it's fun to do it that way. But then as soon as you have a brush some of these tend to release water as soon as they get moved sideways like that, or the mechanism inside might just not be working as well. The little cartridge in there that sends the water up through the brush might just not be as good. And there are different brands so that are better than other brands, so definitely experiment with them. If you find one that you really like, I recommend buying several of them because the brands do kind of change sometimes. But what I was saying was that it is nice to be able to control it and not use a lot of water sometimes. I think I'm just go ahead and color that part in. Yeah, that looks all right. I might super regret this, but I'm gonna do just a little darker on here in that part. Well, that's supposed to be a light part, isn't it? All right. Some of my leaves look like they could use a little bit more development. You have to go back and fix some of them a little bit. We could also use a little bit more dark on the stem, I think. Wouldn't be so bad. As long as I have this dark color that I'm playing with right now, I've got this reddish brown color that I mixed using the green and this green and this red. And a little bit of black. I'm going to go ahead and do some shading on my pot where I had done the graphite before. I've got a little bit more water coming through right now. That's all right. I like the way that looks. Now, since this is the side with the sun, I'm not going to do quite as much dark on that side, so that actually works out really well. Let me do the same thing, or try to do the same thing up here. Similar. This could be a tiny bit darker there, building in, and then I really kind of like that washed out look for the pot. As I'm just pushing if you're watching my hands, sorry, my fingernail polish was coming off and I didn't redo it, and so they look atrocious. But if you're watching my hands, you'll see I'm not actually, in order to get water out, it says push on my brush right there, and I'm not. Right now, I've got a nice little flow of water kind of coming out of the brush. I think sometimes these brushes have a mind of their own. And so I'm not actually doing anything other than moving my brush around right now. It's got a nice little flow going on. I want to make sure you can tell that these two are the same pot, that it's not like an oddly colored. There we go. I like how that looks. All right, I think we'll just finish up this pot. Right, so I wanted to just show you what I've done so far. So the sun's coming from this way, so I was just focusing a little bit on adding on to this pot here. As I went, I kind of added a little bit more dark and then kind of used my water to blend it in. You can see, since this paper is a multimedia paper, it is kind of buckling a little bit. It's puffing a little. It's got a little bit too much water on it when I'm working on the pot. For the plant, I did a lot more dry brush than I did for the pot. Then I kind of carried that on into the table that the plant is on. None of this actually looks like the pot and the table. It's interpretation at this point. When I started off, I was looking a lot at my resource. I was looking a lot at my plant, and then as I went, I just kind of just started playing a little bit with the colors and the shadows and shapes. So I think I might be done there with it. I might go back then let this part dry a little bit, and then I would go back and just make sure I had the shadows how I wanted them. I like how I have the light there, so I might actually go back in with a white gel pen or with a little bit of white gouache. That'll give me just a little bit of a little bit more highlights on there. I think that might be nice. But otherwise, for this particular video, I think we're done with that painting. And like I said, I would go back through and add more. So if you haven't tried using a water brush, I highly recommend them. Like I said, I feel like it helped with my transition from using drawing tools to using more watercolors, using more markers and sort of a fixed pigment into using that watercolor, because you were able to use it more like a marker and do more dry brush with it until I got more comfortable with using the watercolor and letting it flow. All right, well, I hope to see you again. Thank you so much for sticking with me and watching me paint the jade brush. It's been a lot of fun. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you were able to learn something, and I hope you grab a house plant or a photo of a house plant or an outside plant and give it a try. Either use the watercolor tubes and regular brushes in water, or give that water brush a try. All right, have a great rest of your day.